This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Somalia's lower house of parliament votes to cancel President Mohamed Abdullahi's two-year term extension. DRC declares a state of siege in the latest effort to end bloodshed in the eastern provinces of Ituri and North Kivu. And more countries ban travelers from India as the Asian country reports a record number of new infections. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in sports, we profile South Africa's leading female boxing promoter, Joyce Kungwane, who's breaking barriers in a male-dominated sport. We begin the top of the hour in Somalia, where the lower house of parliament has voted unanimously to cancel a divisive two-year presidential term extension it approved last month. The lower house vote came shortly after President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo addressed Parliament, saying he had directed his Prime Minister to spearhead preparations for the election. The move is seen by a majority of the leaders as a step that could help end an armed standoff in the capital, Mogadishu. The crisis over the term extension has raised fears that Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab insurgents could exploit the situation. Militants from Al-Shabaab took over at least one Somali town in the past week as heavily armed fighters moved from the countryside into the capital city.
I would like to state that our Prime Minister, Honorable Mohamed Hussein Roble, will spearhead the process of preparations and the implementation of this electoral process, including election security arrangements, to ensure elections take in a peaceful and stable atmosphere. I have also tasked the Prime Minister to lead the process of facilitating and convening all the signatories of the 17th September 2020 agreement and the recommendations of the Baidoa Technical Committee of 16th February 2021 for its implementation.
Right now, on that story, let's Mohammed Kahir Mohamud, who is a Somali journalist in Mogadishu. Mohammed, what more details can you give us now about Saturday's vote?
Well, thank you so much. Today, a historic moment to avert a possible armed confrontation between the federal government of Somalia and the opposition was today reached at Somalia's lower house of parliament when they averted or reversed an earlier decision to extend the term of President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo for 2 years rejection. And the president who came and addressed the parliament before and after the decision thanked the members of parliament for this decision. And now the country will go to September 17, 2020 electoral agreement, which will now lead the country to indirect polls, whereby 101 delegates will elect members of parliament who will then choose the president, who will be the next president of this country.
And Mohammed, it has been an eventful week for Somalia, starting with clashes between security forces and fears of a return to clan violence. What really triggered President Farmajo's change of heart there?
Well, the president, of course, the president was there was a lot of pressure from the international community, including the European Union, the African Union, the regional body IGAD, and other international bodies, including the UN Security Council and the United Nations, which urged the president that this decision is not good for the stability of the country, which is now recuperating from the 33 decades of violence. And the international community, including the UN Security Council, threatened sanctions if the president goes on. And also the other thing was there's a lot of threat back home, especially in the capital, whereby there was a conflict between the president, the government forces and the opposition, which we witnessed. And also some people say that the president wanted to leave a good legacy, whereby he didn't want to continue with this extension that threaten the stability and security of this nation, which is coming out or recuperating from 3 decades of civil conflict.
All right, Mohammed, thank you very much for your insights. Journalist Mohammed Kahir Mohamud, who is joining us live there from Mogadishu, Somalia. Moving on, let's turn to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where President Felix Tshisekedi has declared a state of siege in the eastern provinces of Ituri and North Kivu. Intercommunal violence and a surge in attacks by armed militias has killed over 300 people so far this year and displaced more than 1.5 million Congolese. Chris Ochamringa has been following the developments for us now.
President's spokesperson made the announcement about the state of siege late on Friday night, and this will basically apply in 2 areas, North Kivu province and Ituri province, where the conflicts have been raging over the past 2 years. They did not specify what exactly would happen, but what we know is that they're going to impose travel restrictions in and out of North Kivu and Ituri province because more than 300 people, like you mentioned, have been killed since the beginning of this year. And the president has been under a lot of pressure from the Congolese citizens, members of parliament, and non-governmental organizations to ensure that he ends this violence in the area. There have been horrific pictures of people whose heads have been slit, women whose stomachs have been cut open, being circulated on social media, and the Congolese people are saying enough is enough, something has to be done. That is why the president has come up with this state of siege to ensure that normal operations in those 2 areas are halted, suspended for a while until peace is restored in the areas. Well, it's still early days, to come up with such a conclusion. But what we know is that the DRC government launched a large-scale military operation in 2019, soon after President. But, there's a lot that is happening in the DRC.
Right, turning to the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases globally has passed the 150 million mark. The World Health Organization says the world is seeing another wave of the virus. In February, the number of new daily cases globally had dropped to about 820,000. The health agency blames a new variant and a failure to follow restrictions for the rise. India has hit a wave of infections has overwhelmed hospitals and morgues while people scramble for scarce medicines and oxygen. On Saturday, the country opened its vaccination program to all adults. Uganda has banned travelers from India as part of new measures to contain the deadly COVID-19 strain. The restrictions come hours after the Ministry of Health confirmed that Uganda has registered the COVID-19 variant discovered in India. CGTN's Hilary Ayasiga now reports.
Ugandan scientists say they've so far detected 5 variants from different countries, and one of them is a highly infectious super spreader variant discovered in India. Health workers are now moving to contain the disease.
All passenger flights between Uganda and India are suspended until further notice.
The Indian Association of Uganda is rallying its members to follow the stipulated health guidelines. Ugandan scientists say so far 1 person has tested positive with the variant that was discovered in India. He is currently undergoing care. They are now advising the public to be cautious and suspend all non-essential travel to countries with high infections. Apart from India, travelers from the US, the UK, Turkey, South Africa and Nigeria, among others, have also been advised to suspend non-essential travel to Uganda. The World Health Organization is now encouraging locals to embrace vaccination.
When you get vaccinated, you ensure that your health systems does not collapse, your economy can be opened, and you prevent mutation.
Uganda has so far registered over 40,000 cases and more than 300 deaths. Scientists are hopeful that the new restrictions could help contain the spread of the deadly disease. Hilary Ayasiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, other countries are also taking action to prevent cases being imported from India. From Tuesday, the United States is expected to bar most non-US citizens from arriving from India. Also from Tuesday, Ireland will impose mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone traveling from or transiting through India. People who leave the designated hotel early could face fines or jail or both. Thailand, Germany and Britain are among the other countries that have imposed travel restrictions on India. Well, other countries are also taking action to prevent cases being imported from India. Moving on, meanwhile, here in Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta has lifted the COVID-19 lockdown he had imposed in March in the capital, Nairobi, and 4 surrounding counties. The move allows a reopening of religious services, schools, bars and restaurants. President Kenyatta has also revised the current evening curfew that starts at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Initially, Nairobi County and surrounding counties were treated as one zone, with residents barred from traveling to other areas. The country has recorded nearly 159,000 cases and more than 2,700 deaths. It's time for us to take a short break. You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Protesters agitate for the rights of workers as the world marks International Labour Day. New museum spotlights the heritage of Africans during South Africa's colonial era.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, International Labour Day is also known as May Day. Parts of the world marked May Day with rallies by unions in support of workers' rights or protests against unpopular government policies. In Istanbul, Turkish police detained more than 200 demonstrators after scuffles broke out at a march on Saturday. The governor's office said some labour unions were allowed to hold events to mark the annual holiday, but others who had gathered in violation of lockdown and ignored calls to disperse were detained. In Paris, there was heavy police presence as thousands of protesters marked May Day, calling for more worker protection. A French broadcaster reported riot police fired small amounts of tear gas. Police said they made 10 arrests. And in London, Kill the Bill protests were held to oppose a proposed law that would broaden police authority to regulate demonstrations. More than 100 were arrested for disorderly conduct, assault on police, and breach of COVID-19 prevention rules. And as the world marks the second International Labour Day during a global pandemic, the International Labour Organization is calling on workers, employers, governments, and international organizations to join forces and ensure work with justice and dignity for all. CGTN's Robert Nagila has the details.
The International Labour Organization says the pandemic has devastated the world of work, destroying jobs, enterprises and livelihoods, forcing millions into poverty. Now, the ILO says a human-centered recovery with justice and equity that is sustainable and inclusive for all is needed. A statement by the ILO Director General Guy Ryder to mark Labour Day says building back better means making deliberate and coherent policy choices to generate jobs, extend social protection and protect workers' rights. A report titled Anticipate, Prepare and Respond to Crisis, released earlier this week by the ILO, marking the World Day of Safety and Health at Work, says at least 7,000 health workers have died globally since the outbreak of COVID-19. The report goes on to say 1 in 5 healthcare workers globally have reported depression and anxiety symptoms. The ILO says many of the 1.6 billion workers in the informal economy continued working despite restrictions on movement and social interactions. This put them at a higher risk of catching the virus without access to basic social protection such as sick leave or sick pay. The ILO is now urging countries and businesses to put in place sound and resilient occupational safety and health systems to minimize risks for workers. Back to you.
Well, let's shift our focus to South Africa, where a new museum has been opened at the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town. The Kamisa Museum and Centre for Restorative Memory explores the heritage of Africans classified by British colonial authorities and the apartheid-era regime as mixed-race persons. CGTN's Travis Andrews tells us more.
It's been more than 25 years in the making, but now the new Kamisa Museum and Centre for Restorative Memory has finally opened its doors. The Kamisa Museum aims to showcase the rich and diverse history of mixed-race Africans in Cape Town, as well as their ancestral heritage.
Kamisa Museum is a museum for the people. We understand that the castle has a very important historic and symbolic role, but the real Kamisa people live in Guguletu, in Mitchell's Plain, in Paarl, in Nelspruit, all over the place. So wherever there are stories about the children and the people of Kamisa, we want to link those stories to the museum.
The museum is located within the Castle of Good Hope, which is the oldest colonial-era building in South Africa and a symbol of the country's oppressive past. It allows centuries of artifacts that tell the story of the establishment of Cape Town and the people who inhabit it. It's also meant to unite South Africans who are still divided.
That people who struggle to say, who am I, where do I come from, where do I go to, will be able to source information and also to upload information to create this new history of inclusion, of liberation of all. Both the liberator and the oppressor and the liberated will find each other around a campfire called Kamisa.
For now, the museum has been reaching out to South Africans from different communities so that they can contribute to building a cultural monument that can give Cape Townians a real sense of heritage and belonging. The Castle of Good Hope hopes to have the Kamisa Museum for Restorative Memory fully populated with artifacts over the next few months. In the meantime, phase 1 of the rollout includes an online presence of archives so that people from around the world can get a sense of what's to come. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And still in South Africa, where salvage operations are continuing at the University of Cape Town, the university's library was gutted in the recent Table Mountain fire. Priceless written and audio-visual artifacts from its African Studies collection also went up in flames. Now, though, a team of restoration experts and volunteers have been attempting to save what they can of this invaluable collection of African history. Once again, here is CGTN's Travis Andrews.
This is the scorched remains of one of the University of Cape Town's most important buildings. The Jaguar Library went up in flames after its roof caught alight in the recent Table Mountain fire. The library's African Studies collection was also gutted and is seen as a massive blow to African history.
We have lost all the materials that were in the reading room, and that is quite a sizable chunk of our African Studies book collection. That's close on to anything between 60 and 70,000 items. We've lost a very unique Africa film collections. That was about 3,500 films that were carefully curated and collected over a period of 20 years.
A team of restoration experts has been conducting salvage operations inside the burnt building, and volunteers have been assisting. Staff are also painstakingly sorting through waterlogged books, photos, as well as film reels.
The phase that we're in now is the salvage of materials from the basement. We've got 2 basements and an interspace. I think we've covered more than 65% of all the materials that were in the basement. It's about completing it. We have a triage here where we're identifying wet and dry materials and for treatment, etc.
Within the triage center, some materials have been saved. Staff have also been working tirelessly to store them in a safe way.
Have been regularly pulling out material since the event happened. with a human chain passing crates of wet and soggy material up and down this human chain into the triage tent that you have in the background here, where we physically look at the material.
For now, though, the entire salvage of the library contents could take weeks, and only then can a determination be made on just how badly the fires affected the entire African Studies program. The University of Cape Town has reached out to other universities around the world who have African Studies programs, so that there can be a sharing of knowledge as well as written and audio-visual materials. Now, they estimate it will take around 3 years for the library to be fully rebuilt. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And it's just about time for the sport. Here's what's coming up. We profile South Africa's leading female boxing promoter Joyce Kungwane, who is breaking barriers in a male-dominated sport.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, we kick off with the English Premier League, where Manchester City have moved to the brink of a third Premier League title in 4 seasons as a piece of magic by Sergio Aguero set them on the way to a 2-0 victory at Crystal Palace on Saturday. Pep Guardiola's side were totally dominant but missing a cutting edge until Aguero's stunning half-volley finish just before the hour mark broke Palace's resolve at Selhurst Park. A minute later, Ferran Torres' clinical low shot doubled City's advantage, and they could have racked up a bigger margin of victory as they turned on the style with Raheem Sterling denied by the woodwork and Joao Cancelo also going close. With 4 games left, City have 80 points, 13 ahead of Manchester